Hello and welcome to the 2020 Annual Information Meeting. Bonjour et bienvenue.
Hello and welcome to our 2020 Annual Information Meeting.
My name is Leonard Lee White and I am the Chair of the Board of Trustees of the New Brunswick Public Service Pension Plan. While the meeting today looks a little different this year, the Board is pleased to still be able to be with you for the 6th consecutive year. Thanks for joining us. Now a few housekeeping items before we get started. Presentations will be delivered in English and French with simultaneous translation available in both languages. You have the option to select your language of choice as indicated on the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Closed captioning is provided for those joining us online. You have the option to turn it on by selecting your language of choice and clicking Join, or by clicking Stop. We encourage you to submit any questions you have for your Board of Trustees or any of the presenters at any time during the meeting by clicking the Submit a Question icon. We will answer as many as we can during the question and answer session. And finally, a recording of today's webcast will be available on the plan's website in the coming days. Before we begin the presentations, I'd like to introduce your Board of Trustees. Ross Galbraith, Vice Chair of the Board and Business Manager of Local 37 of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Marilyn Quinn, retired registered nurse and past president of the New Brunswick Nurses Union. Marilyn served as your chairperson of the Board of Trustees from 2014 to 2019. Sebastian Deschênes, Dean of the Faculty of Administration at the Université de Moncton and Professor of Accounting. Mark Gaudette, Chair of the Audit Committee and recently retired Assistant Deputy Minister responsible for Strategic Services with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. Kathy Greenbank, Chair of the Governance Committee and retired member of the NBPSPP. Paul Martin, Controller for the Province of New Brunswick and past President of the New Brunswick Institute of Chartered Accountants. Susie Prudeg, President of the New Brunswick Union. Odette Robichaud, retired court stenographer and past President of CUPE Local 1840 and past CUPE Regional Vice President. We also have two observers on your board. Lee Sprague, Executive Director of the New Brunswick Union, and Bill Murray, Facilities Supervisor with the New Brunswick Community College and President of CUPE Local 5017. In addition, I would like to introduce today's presenters. Yves Plourde, partner of the plan's actuarial firm Morneau Chappelle. Yves will provide us with details relating to the plan's most recent actuarial valuation report and an update based on the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. John Sinclair, President and CEO of Vestcor, the plan's investment manager and administrator. John will provide us with an overview of the investment and administrative services outcomes for the plan in 2019. And Mark Bourque from Vestcor's Member Services, who will be sharing with us how your cost of living adjustment is calculated. As for myself, I am a former Assistant Deputy Minister of the Department of Finance and Treasury Board and have been a trustee with this pension plan since the NBPSPP's conversion, and I've been board chair since late 2019. We have very diverse backgrounds, providing us with a strong board composition. And it's important to note that each of us has been appointed to the board by either the provincial government or one of the following unions: the New Brunswick Nurses Union, the New Brunswick Union of Public and Private Employees, Local 37 of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and by the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Locals 1252, 1840, and 5017. Most of us are also members of the plan. Even though we've been appointed by these organizations, each of us has a fiduciary duty to the NBPSPP and must act in the best interest of the plan and all its members when administering the affairs of the plan. Failure to do so can result in disciplinary actions or revocation of our appointment. I want to take a moment to acknowledge what is likely to be on the minds of many of you in attendance. I am referring to the COVID-19 pandemic and the effect it has had on your plan. We want to reassure you, as Eve will report, that the NBPSPP remains sufficiently overfunded. Our investments are well diversified with significant risk management in place, beyond what you would see in a traditional pension plan. These measures are designed to reduce the effect of volatile markets on the NBPSPP compared to traditional pension plans. Fluctuations in quarterly investment performance of the NBPSPP are to be expected, so it's important that we maintain a long-term focus when looking at the assets of the plan. Despite the recent challenges, long-term investment returns for the NBPSPP still exceed what is required for the plan to remain on a strong financial footing. We want to assure you your pensions are secure. We would also like to reassure you that our service providers are continuing to monitor the province's COVID business recovery guidelines, and that our investment, administration, and actuarial services will continue without interruption. We will now move on to our first presentation. The Actuarial Evaluation Report is an important tool used by the Board of Trustees to assess the NBPSPP's ability to provide pension benefits to you as a member. It also helps guide us in making decisions regarding the finances of the plan, such as granting COLA. Eve Plourde will present the plan's 2019 results. Welcome, Eve.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So my name is Yves Plourde, and I am an actuary at Morneau-Chapelle. I'm quite pleased to be here today to be able to present the results of the actuarial evaluation or assessment in the program, the NBPSPP for 2020. So I'm going to start by a summary of the participation in the plan. I'd like to give you a short history of this plan and the various provisions. And I would like to go over the provisions, not only for 2020, but over the recent past, and show you how the level was affected in 2020 by the pandemic. I will next go over the results of the tests of management of tests that we quantify on an annual basis. And finally, I will give you information concerning the adjustment for cost of living, which was granted by trustees on the 1st of January 2021. Let's begin with the participation in the plan. The level of participants has not stopped growing since 2014. We began with approximately 17,000 in 2014, and then we reached 18,000, some 18,000 in the 1st of January 2020. And the increase in retirees has outpaced the increase in active members during that period. And because the baby boomers in the workforce have now reached the age of retirement. So we went from 13,800 in 2014 to 17,000 on the 1st of January 2020. So the increase in retirees outpaced the increase in active members during that period, which we refer to as a maturation of the plan. This is to be expected since, given the prevalence of baby boomers in the workforce, who have now reached the age of retirement. And the plan now is prepared to accept such an inflow of retirees, and therefore this is not an area of major concern, as it was expected. A positive note for the plan here is to see that the number of active members has been increased significantly as well, providing a constant inflow of new contributors and delaying an otherwise earlier maturation of the plan. On the asset side now, the pension fund has increased significantly over the last few years from about $6 billion in 2014 to over $8.35 billion as of January 1st, 2020. The year 2019 was particularly good from an investment perspective, with an investment return of 11.65%. John will give you more information on the performance in his comments a little later. Now, to be able to determine the financial position of the plan, we need to compare the assets of the plan to its liability. The plan's liability is a representation of how much money we believe should be in the fund at the time of the valuation in order to pay all the benefits that members have accrued up to the date of the evaluation. In order to calculate the liability, we need to make many assumptions about the future. One of those assumptions is the discount rate that we use, that of 4.75% per annum. This is a very conservative assumption of expected investment returns for the future. In fact, we estimate that the fund can be expected to earn over the long term about 5.8% per annum. This level of conservatism in the discount rate ensures us that more often than not, plan investments should generate extra funds compared to our discount rate assumption, as it did from 2014 to 2019, which helps in generating surplus in the plan. As you can see, the plan's liability went from just under $6.0 billion in 2014 to about $7.28 billion on January 1st, 2020. You will notice that the assets in the plan increased faster than the plan liability over that period. This is partly due to the fact that we use a conservative discount rate of 4.75% per annum. To finally determine the financial position of the plan, the trustees add to the assets the amount of contributions made to the plan in excess of the cost of the accruing benefits over the next 15 years. On January 1st, 2020, those excess contributions for the 15 years following the valuation date represent an amount of $1.2 billion, which, when added to the assets, represents total adjusted assets of over $9.5 billion. Now, when you divide the plan's adjusted assets by its liability, you obtain a funded ratio called the open group funded ratio. As you can see in this graph, this ratio has remained well above 100% over the last years, which means that we believe there are enough assets in the plan to provide for all the benefits payable for the lifetime of members and retirees. The funded ratio has in fact increased from a level of 121.5% in 2014 to 131.7% at January 1st, 2020. This means that as time goes by, your pension benefits are becoming more secure as we accumulate a bigger buffer, about 100%. You could say that the plan has been getting ready over the last 6 years to face whatever risks may lie ahead. Which brings me to the COVID-19 pandemic under which we find ourselves. As you are well aware, the World Health Organization declared a world pandemic on March 12, 2020. As a result of the pandemic, the financial markets retreated in an unprecedented manner, hitting a low at about the end of March 2020. For the first 3 months of the year 2020, the plan had investment returns of about negative 6.9%, which has reduced the funded status of the plan from 131.7% at January 1st to about 122.8% at March 31st, 2020. Even with a world pandemic, the funded status of your plan remained well above 100%. And it even remained above the level it was at in 2014. This shows the resilience of the pension plan to adverse events thrown at it. Although it is not surprising that financial markets react negatively to a pandemic, what happened after the month of March is, in my opinion, what's most remarkable. Even though we are still in the midst of this pandemic with infections rising again, an apparent second wave growing around the world, and still no vaccine in sight, the financial markets have rebounded almost as quickly as they have come down. For the period of March 31st to August 31st, 2020, the plan had investment return of over 10%, which brought the funded ratio back to about 132%, where it basically started the year before the pandemic even started. As I mentioned earlier, the plan has been basically preparing for the last 6 years to face an event like this one, and it passed the test with flying colors. We are by no means out of this pandemic, and high volatility and uncertainty is likely to remain for some time. We hope that we will not have to revisit the lows of March 2020, but if that is where the markets are going in the future, you can rest assured that your plan is ready to face the music. Let's now think about the next 20 years. You can see that we expect that the funded ratio will hit over 146% in 20 years from now. This projection, which reveals that the ratio is expected to increase over time, reassures me that the design of the plan is such that chances of success in the future are on our side. The road will be bumpy, and 2020 was the perfect example of this bumpiness. But we now know that the plan is very resilient and that the margins built within the plan to absorb such shocks work. Let's now talk about certain risk management tests conducted annually. The first risk management test involves calculating the probability that base benefits under the plan will not have to be reduced over the next 20 years. On that basis, the plan scores a 99.35%, which means that in more than 99% of the studied cases, the base benefits payable from the plan remain intact. This score exceeds the minimum of 97.5% mandated under the Pension Act. Because the plan meets this test, it can continue to provide cost of living adjustments to all members and retirees of the plan. The second risk management test involves a calculation of the average cost of living increases that can be expected to be provided under the plan over the next 20 years. This calculation results in expected average cost of living adjustments of 88.6% of inflation over the next 20 years. Those two risk management test results continue to be very positive. They reassure us that the security of the base benefits is very high and that there is a very high likelihood that cost of living adjustments are going to continue. You can also get some reassurance with the fact that the province is guaranteeing that it will protect benefit levels that existed at December 31st, 2013. This means that in the unlikely event that trustees would have to reduce benefits under the plan, the province will ensure that you never get less than the benefits you were receiving or had accrued at December 31st, 2013. I will now end my presentation by addressing the cost of living adjustment awarded by the trustees for January 1st, 2021. Every year, based on the financial position of the plan, the trustees have to decide if a cost of living adjustment can be awarded. For January 1st, 2021, they were able to award an amount of 1.46%. This cost of living adjustment is provided at a cost of $100.6 million for the plan. Our next speaker will talk more about how the COLA is calculated. Finally, I would like to mention that the trustees will be able to continue to award cost of living adjustments in the future as long as the plan's funded ratio remains above approximately 113% or thereabout. Even at the bottom of the financial market downturn at the end of March 2020, the funded ratio only fell to 122.8%. This shows you that the cost of living adjustment for January 1st, 2021 was never really in jeopardy, even during the depths of the financial market downturn that we went through so far. I do hope that you found the information provided interesting and useful, and that it provided you with a better understanding of how resilient your plan is in the face of adversity. Thank you for your attention. I will be available for the question period. Thank you.
Housekeeping item for those of you using the phone-in option, we ask that you put your phone on mute or please refrain from speaking. Thank you. As a board, we are very pleased with the results of the actuarial valuation report. The level of positive returns in 2019 allowed us once again to provide a full cost of living adjustment of 1.46 to all plan members. Active and deferred members will have this amount applied to their benefit earned up to December 31st, 2019, while retirees will see the increase applied to their monthly pension benefit as of January 1st, 2021. There remain several legal actions in process related to the NBPSPP, one of which directly affects the plan and the board. The board has retained legal counsel to defend the interests of the plan. Hearing of motions is scheduled for October 20th, and the board will provide updates to members as warranted. Moving to our next presentation, it is our pleasure today to invite Mark Bork from Vestcor's Member Services team to provide us with a short presentation on how exactly your cost of living adjustment is calculated. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. President. Each year, the New Brunswick Public Service Pension Plan Board of Trustees reviews the plan's funding level and determines whether a cost of living adjustment, or COLA, can be provided to plan members. The decision is based on the actuarial valuation prepared by the plan's actuary and the plan's funding policy. There are three possible outcomes that can occur. Either there is enough surplus to provide full COLA, enough surplus to provide partial COLA to the plan members, or not enough of a surplus or plan deficit to provide no COLA to members. If a full COLA is not awarded, the remainder of the COLA not awarded may be provided in subsequent years. Although COLA is not guaranteed, by plan design, the likelihood of awarding COLA is very high. COLA is applied to all plan members, active employees, deferred members, and retirees. On January 1st, 2021, COLA was calculated by comparing the average consumer price index for the period of the previous 12 months, or from July 2019 to June 2020, with the average CPI of the period of July 2018 to June 2019. The average CPIs for those corresponding periods are 136.6 and and 134.63 respectively, given a COLA of 1.46% to be awarded on January 1st, 2021. And the CPI figures are drawn from the Bank of Canada. Our member services team is available from 8:15 to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Joining us now is John Sinclair, President and CEO of Vestcor, the plan's investment manager and the administration services provider. John will provide us with a summary of the plan's 2019 results. John.
Thank you very much, Leonard. Before jumping right into the results for 2019, I thought I would take a few minutes just to review who exactly Vestcor is and what we do. Vestcor provides, as was mentioned earlier, both the investment management and plan administration services for the public service plan. We're a private entity that is independent and is jointly owned between your pension plan and the New Brunswick Teachers' Pension Plan. The organization is governed and oversight is provided by an independent, experienced board of directors. And that board is responsible for coordinating a number of different audits and checks on our services. Those audits are typically done by external service providers and national accounting firms and include such items as financial statements, investment performance reports, and various external business audits that the board may want to take on from time to time. We'd like to think we have a significant amount of transparency in our organization, and material is available on our website, vestcor.org, which provides a number of these types of reports for you to review if interested. With respect to the advantages of the Vestcor organization, as mentioned earlier, we do have an independent board of directors whose full fiduciary duty is to look after the best interests of the clients we serve, such as your pension plan. We have the ability to provide customized services, and I think you know that, for example, the shared risk plan type design or target benefit type design that your plan holds and is described to some extent by Eve earlier is specific to the New Brunswick area primarily. And we have the ability to provide services that really fit through that type of structure through the work we've done in that area. We have a very strong track record with respect to both the administration service delivery platform that we have and also our investment management services. Some of that information I'll share with you as an update in further slides. And we're extremely cost effective. The corporation is designed as a not-for-profit, so there is no profit margin that is included within the structure of our operating costs, and we have no large, for example, marketing budget as well that does impact the cost would impact the costs of our organization. So this allows us to really be fully aligned with the objectives of our clients, as we don't have a business initiative in terms of trying to market services and as mentioned earlier, to generate a profit. So I'd like to start off with the plan administration report. And before looking at the 2019 results, just remind you what our plan administration group does. One of the big areas of service that we provide is the day-to-day plan administration of both pension plans like yourselves and some employee benefit plans that the province of New Brunswick provides to their employees. You met Mark just before me with respect to our member services team, and they provide support on a day-to-day basis to active members of the pension plan, retirees of the pension plan, surviving spouses or beneficiaries that may be still involved with the plan, and various employer groups who obviously provide this pension plan as a benefit to their employees. The Board Support Services team provides governance support to your trustees in terms of organizing meetings for the trustee group, organizing agendas for the group, providing documentation and record keeping, and helping them with respect to some of the best practice initiatives that they have underway with respect to their governance. And last but not least, our team also provides the communication services. So, for example, facilitating this event this afternoon, providing your annual reports, member newsletters, and as well providing a fairly extensive website with respect to information on your pension plan. So as mentioned earlier, our organization is very cost effective, and that includes the administration services. We have an update and a further slide as to how cost effective we were in 2019. We also do an extensive amount of survey activity for clients that we provide services to. Many of you out there who would have talked to or received a service from a member services team should have received a survey in which you could actually score your client satisfaction and provide additional comments that we then internalize to make our services better. As I mentioned earlier, we also have a comprehensive website that provides a significant amount of information with respect to your pension plan and helpful tools such as a pension estimate calculator to allow active members to run various scenarios around potential scenarios they may be looking for with respect to their own retirement. Finally, and as we would have, for those of you who would have participated in this meeting last year, we kicked off an important system modernization effort at the end of last year and started to implement it early this year, which we expect will lead to significant future cost savings, more timely service to members and employers, and provide increased security and reliability with respect to the IT infrastructure that we use. So with respect to 2019, from a cost perspective and a cost per member perspective, your plan was the second lowest at a cost of $93 per member versus a national peer group of public sector pension plans that we provide information and share information with. We've spent a lot of time continuing to emphasize the improvement of communications, again, through the written material and reports that we provide to the plan, and also through the website and some video technology tools that we are starting to deploy there. And as mentioned earlier, we've continued to gauge member satisfaction. And this chart here shows exactly how that satisfaction was scored during the year. You can see that overall the satisfaction rate was high from members who used our member services facilities. And as well, on the right-hand side is an outline of the key performance indicators for various processes that we conduct for our plan members. Again, a number of them significantly exceeding what those KPIs are. As you can see from the footnote in the bottom left, when we have additional information that is provided with respect to, first of all, the annual report that's on your website, but also when we post these slides to the meeting site for this meeting, we have a couple of additional slides in an appendix that will disclose some of this information further. So moving from administration to investment management, again, a recap of what exactly we do for your pension plan. So we advise your trustee group here this afternoon on helping them set up the investment policy that they think will provide the long-term returns necessary to continue to fund your pension plan. And once that investment policy has been determined, we actually deliver on the investment services of investing the assets in your plan to deliver on that promise. As Yves pointed out in his actuarial review, there are also stringent risk management tests that must be made. He referred to a primary and secondary goal. And in setting out the investment policy, we need to make sure that the plan will be able to satisfy those goals going forward. We'd like to think that the portfolio is designed in three sort of ways outlined here in following bullets. First of all, to avoid, to the best of our ability, undue investment risk and investment market volatility over shorter time periods. And Yves, again, provided a little bit of a case study as to how that has worked out so far during the life of the plan. In addition to that, we look to use our investment staff to try to create excess investment returns above and beyond the investment policy rate to, again, help provide an additional level of funding to the plan. And we have a target, try to target that and measure that over 4-year periods. So let's have a look at 2019, and as Yves again mentioned earlier, it was a very strong year for investment returns. You may remember back in 2018, we would have talked about how your plan had returned 1.75%, which when you look at it over the periods shown here was a relatively lower return. But if you remember, 2018 actually was a very tough investment market, particularly at the end of the year where markets dropped precipitously. And most defined benefit pension plans were actually negative for the year. 2019, on the other hand, was a very strong year in financial markets. And as pointed out here, we generated 11.65% for the portfolio. And the amount of value above and beyond your investment policy was about 0.5%, as indicated in this slide. Now, a couple of ways to look at what that 0.5% means. First of all, when you look at that on this slide, it looks like a very small sliver of the overall return. However, when you apply that percentage against the assets under management, that works out to about $30 million of extra return that was generated for the plan during the year. And if we look at that in terms of the average pension that was paid out by the public service plan during the year, that's about 1,300 additional pensions that could be paid by just that additional 0.5% that we were able to generate during the year. Let's look at these returns over a longer term time period. And here if you look really closely, you can see there is a shaded line, which is the return of your fund for 2019 and over various time periods out into the future. So the first thing we want to look at is how has your fund done versus the return that's required. And one of the returns that's required from the actuarial perspective is a 4.75% annual return per year to fund the benefits that have been granted to date. Obviously, when you look at this track record, you can see that we were able to exceed that return throughout the period. The other thing we want to look at, though, is how have we done vis-a-vis other pension plans, and how have we done particularly versus this low-risk approach that we hold ourselves out to. So you can see, for example, in 2019, the return of 11.65% when compared to the next line down, which is the Canadian Defined Benefit Pension Plan universe as measured by Royal Bank of Canada Investor and Treasury Services, the median plan there was a little over 14%. So in 2019, the return generated by your plan was a little bit lower than that typical median defined benefit pension plan. However, in thinking again about the risk management goals we have, and if you've been a participant in past annual meetings, you would have heard me mention that we would typically, in periods where we had very strong financial markets, we would typically expect that we would underperform the typical defined benefit pension plan, again, because of the risk management focus we have, but we should perform better in the weaker time periods. So I just mentioned to you, for example, in 2018 was a weak market environment, and we actually saw a period where most of the defined benefit pension plans were negative. I think the median plan return was minus 0.7% in 2018. And remember, I showed that we had a return of 1.75%. So we did better in the weaker market environment like we expect. But to be able to do that, we do expect that we'll probably do a little bit, we'll underperform to some extent in stronger market environments, which we did in 2019. As importantly, looking at the 2-year number here, though, where we take in the weak period of 2018 and the strong period of 2019, you can see that your plan actually did better than that median manager return, 6.58 versus 6.3. So again, validation about the low-risk type approach that we're deploying here. The other thing in the footnotes is to mention is that these returns are presented as on a gross basis, so they don't include investment management expenses. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a very cost-effective management style, which studies indicate are as much as 0.3% lower than other external type investment managers. And again, we can quantify what that means. In terms of that 0.3% per year, that works out to about 1,000 extra pensions that we can pay by having lower investment management expenses. And another way to look at it is thinking about how important that is over the long term, and pensions, remember, are long-term investment objectives, because what happens is employees and employers contribute to plans annually through their work life, and that work life can be 30 or 35 years. So if we're going to save about 0.3% every year, when we do a future value calculation, we can end up with approximately 15% more in assets when it comes time to retire. So a very significant, what looks like a very small number in a one-year window becomes a very significant number over the long term. And then I wanted to include this slide just to show you again how well diversified your investment program is. And again, this really is tied to the investment policy that's been developed and approved by your board to be able to meet the long-term investment objectives of the plan. And you can see here there's a very strong mix of well-diversified fixed income investments, private investments, equity investments, both from a typical market equity type perspective and a low volatility equity strategy, and as well a absolute return strategy that we've developed in-house that we have put in place to hopefully not correlate with typical market events. So that recaps 2019, and again, there's lots of additional information within your annual report breaking down various attributions and returns at the various asset class level. But I'm sure people are interested in an update of where we are at this point in 2020. So 2020 started off as a great year. Financial markets continued to strengthen on the back of those strong results in 2019, and the implementation of our new pension system was up and running. And you may have noticed, for example, particularly for retirees, those who were receiving a payment check or a EFT advice, that had changed from sort of the standard province of New Brunswick type of document to a Vestcor type document. So the implementation of that payroll system went very, very well. But as we all know, we were all challenged by the COVID environment in late February into March. And as Yves mentioned, financial markets were significantly negatively impacted in February and March. Now, as he pointed out, the return that we had experienced at that time was a high negative single-digit return. If we compare that to many other pension plans, again, thinking about our low-risk approach, it was much better than many of those other plans had experienced. But more importantly, when we look at where we sat at mid-year, and we'll have an update out shortly with respect to your mid-year newsletter, the total return of the plan was 0.12%. And that was on the back of a strong rebound in financial markets and the confidence we had in being able to provide the liquidity necessary to pay pensions out during that whole time period. As importantly, we're at a positive return at mid-year, but again, putting our long-term hat on, and as pointed out here, the long-term annualized return since the plan was transitioned to a shared risk plan in 2014 remains at about 6.47%. Again, well in advance of that 4.75% discount rate. The COVID challenge as well impacted our administration system implementation. So both our own internal organization, the reliance on information and input from employer groups, and as well the IT resources that we were using for this system's implementation had all been impacted, obviously, like everybody else had been through the COVID period. So we needed to focus on prioritizing the ability for us to continue to provide critical services, and that's caused some delays in some areas. One of the ones is with respect to pension statements that active members are receiving. You probably would have noticed that the pension statements that we typically send out prior to the summer have been delayed somewhat, and we expect that they will be delivered, however, by near the end of the month, in line with the Pension Benefits Act requirements. So one of the things that we are working very closely on getting done. But again, the focus has been on critical resources. It was mentioned earlier, and I think Leonard mentioned it in the introduction, we have been very focused through this whole COVID episode on making sure that we can continue to provide services on the administration and the investment side for our clients. Thankfully, we had a very detailed business continuity plan in place that we were able to enact early in March, where we were able to take our workforce, make sure everybody was safe and secure, and redeploy them into one of three different methods. We had a small group that remained in the office. We deployed another small group to a business recovery site that we have fully access to here in the Fredericton area, and we were able to have a number of staff redeployed home through the technological abilities that we have. And to date, we've been able to, again, provide critical services both on the admin and the investment side since this pandemic first took place. So I believe that wraps up what I had to share. And as mentioned earlier, obviously there's the ability to ask questions in this session or to provide them online, and we look forward to following up on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I'm now pleased to welcome Susie Prudeg to monitor our question and answer period. Susie?
Merci, Leonard. Hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here today with you. As Leonard mentioned, I'm Susie Prudeg, a member of the Board of Trustees as well as a participant in a plan.
These are our guests who have presented to us today. Please submit your question to us by clicking on the Ask a Question button that appears on your screen. Note that if you have questions specific to your own pension, we encourage you to contact the Member Services team by calling 1-800-561-4012 or by emailing info at vestcor.org. In addition, members have already submitted several questions online prior to today's meeting, and we will answer as many questions as we possibly can. All the questions that we're unable to answer during the meeting will be answered and summarized through a question and answer document made available to all members at vestcor.org/NBPSPP in the coming weeks. So I'm going to move on to our first question. John, this one's for you. When are the 2019 Employee Statement of Pension Benefits coming out?
Okay, thank you, Susie. And as mentioned, we are expecting to have those statements available and in distribution near the end of this month. Again, that's in line with the Pension Benefits Act requirements, but obviously a little bit later than what we've been able to do in the past. But again, primarily this delay has all been due to the implication of COVID and again, our focus on critical elements of our administration system. One item for those who, though, can't wait until that time period takes place is that there is always the ability to use the prior year statement and update that information with respect to the year of salary that you've accrued, and use the pension calculator on the website, the vestcor.org PSPP website, to provide those calculations. And then the other thing I would point out, however, if there is anybody who is seriously considering retirement and needs that information before that date in a critical fashion, please reach out to the Member Services team, to those contact points that were provided earlier, and they'll be happy to provide you with a detailed update at that point in time.
Thanks, John. Has consideration been given to eliminate the penalty for retirement after the age of 60? If not, how could this happen? This one's for you, Yves.
Thank you, Susie. The Board of Trustees actually follows a document in terms of their ability to amend the provisions of the pension plan or improve the pension plan, and that all those rules are found in the funding policy. That's the name of the document. And that's the document that they look at when they grant cost of living adjustments, for example, which is the first benefit that they can provide and that they do provide every year. But then there's a list there of other things that they can do, and they need to follow that in order, and it really depends on how well financed the plan is. So for example, step one is the cost of living, which everybody counts on and is expecting. But secondly, if the plan gets fully funded at over 140%, and we're, if you remember my presentation, at 131.7 at this point in time, when you get over 140, then you can apply a contribution reduction. After that, there would be an establishment of a reserve for 10 years for indexing. So I haven't talked yet about the early retirement reduction because it's not part of the first three. On the fourth bullet, after you've given all these things, then there would be an opportunity for the Board of Trustees to consider potentially benefit improvements to the plan, such as early retirement reductions, but it would come after the first three, and that type of benefit improvement would only be a recommendation that the board would make to the province and to the union, who would have then to either approve or negotiate that. So there's a process here. Unfortunately, I don't think that it is in the immediate priority of the Board of Trustees, given that they have to take care of the cost of living, and then before that there'd be contribution reductions and a reserve for guaranteeing future indexing.
Thanks, Eve. John, Section 11 of the December 2018 financial report gives the administration expenses. What would be the effective management expense ratio for the investment management?
So the effective management expense ratio works out to about 13 basis points, or 0.13% for 2019. That was slightly higher than the year prior. I believe the year prior was 12. And as much as anything, thinking with the detail behind that, it's almost a rounding difference. I think it went from 12.4 to 12.9 or something like that. So it remains still very cost effective versus other alternatives. And as pointed out in my slide, we think it can be up as much as 0.3% difference than other external management alternatives.
Okay, thanks. What's the board's involvement in the approval process of the audited financial statements? Mark?
Thank you, Susie. The financial statements are prepared by Vestcor, and then they're audited by the auditing firm KPMG. Both Vestcor and KPMG present a report to the audit committee, which I chair, and after the audit committee approves the financial statements, then they're presented to this full board for final approval.
Okay, thanks. What prevents Vestcor from creating a pool that just invests in their own products and hence artificially inflates the value of investments? John?
I think there's a number of things. First of all, we are under the direction of the investment policy statement that we mentioned earlier with respect to the trustees. Within our organization, we do have an independent compliance team that make sure that we follow all of the various guidelines that are put together there. And then I guess piggybacking on Mark's comments with respect to the audit committee, with respect to reporting on a quarterly basis, there's an intensive valuation process that takes place looking at the market price of securities, not the price that we necessarily would have traded securities at, which would verify whether things were actually at market or not. So as I mentioned, a number of checks and balances there to preclude something like that from happening.
Thank you. Leonard, can you speak on how members of the board are selected?
The plan documentation specifies which organizations appoint members to the board. Now that the board is up and running, we have our own processes and we do evaluations of board performance and skills that are prevalent on the board. And we would go back to the appointing organizations when someone's term is coming up and indicate whether that person was still interested and willing to serve, whether they were still suitable, depending on the changing nature of the skills matrix. And we would then advise the appointing body whether they should be seeking someone new or they would want to consider reappointing that individual. So it really doesn't matter to which organization, whether it's the province or one of the appointing unions, we treat it the same way. In terms of the actual appointment, though, that is out of our hands. That would be up to the appointing body.
Okay, thank you. What impact could COVID-19 have on the long-term and short-term value of our pensions? John?
Well, that's a very tough question at this point in time, and a very important question. The results to the financial markets really is going to depend on how quickly we can actually see that there will be some sort of result with respect to a vaccine and how the market reacts to that. That being said, so certainly that the vaccine issue will, I think, be the most important factor in the short term. That being said, remember, we are a very long-term investor. We have a focus on a very diversified investment policy. And the other piece to think about is that for those who follow central bank activity very closely, all of the central banks around the world, including the Bank of Canada, have been very accommodative in terms of providing very low interest rates and additional stimulus to help make sure that investment markets stay very liquid and that companies have capital available to invest and continue to conduct their business. And therefore, over the medium to longer term, we certainly would expect that we'd be able to continue to generate returns necessary that's required for this plan as laid out in the investment policy.
Okay, thank you, John. Kathy, in this time of pandemic and risk management being on top of mind, has the board done any work on risk management?
Thank you. Managing risk is a key responsibility of the Board of Trustees, and an ability to manage risk is fundamental to the success of a pension board. An enterprise risk management framework was developed and put in place in 2018. Prior to that, risk management oversight was focused on the funding policy, taking into consideration the asset mix, performance, and rates of return on the fund, amongst other items. The ERMF, Enterprise Risk Management Framework, identifies and defines risks, assigns responsibility for managing each risk, and determines how to control and monitor the risk. The risk for the New Brunswick Public Service Pension Plan are categorized into 5 areas: board effectiveness, plan design and funding, investment policy, communications, and agency risk. So what I'd like to do is to say, let's take a look at one of these risks and how we look at it. So the risk is that asset mix is suboptimal and does not achieve the funding policy's risk management test. This falls under the category investment policy and is the responsibility of the board. So the measures and controls in place are that an annual funding policy risk management test is taken, which Yves presented today, and it was completed in June by Morneau Chappelle and presented to us. We review the quarterly investment report performance. The board has a meeting later this week. We will go through the Q2 results in great detail. We also, from time to time, have an asset liability model study, which outlines alternative asset mix choices that we could apply. This is a comprehensive report and was last done by Morneau Chappelle in May of 2018. Our ERMF is a working document, and as risks are identified, they will be incorporated. I'll give you a couple of examples of how that worked. One of the items was, what would we do with a data breach, or considering a data breaches, which fall under the category of agency risk, as the management of our plan and payments to pensioners have been outsourced. What we did was we added that our service providers report annually to us on their cybersecurity controls. As Leonard talked earlier, when COVID-19 hit the financial markets, the Governance Committee requested an update from Vestcor on how the plan could be affected. That was February 29th. This was followed up by the board meeting of March 18th with a further update from Vestcor and Morneau Chappelle outlining how the then negative returns would affect our portfolio and therefore our risk management tests. An estimate of the open group funded ratio, which Yves presented today, was provided along with assurance that the diversification of the portfolio provided downside protection for our plan. So what you can, from this presentation, what you can see is risk management is central to our board oversight. Items are set out to control and monitor risks. They are incorporated in our regular board and committee meetings. And I hope this provides a good overview of our risk management system.
Thank you, Kathy. How did this plan perform in the last 4 years in the Royal Bank of Canada Investor and Treasury Services Survey? John.
Okay, I think I'll just revert back to the slides that I had provided. And over the 4-year period, we had the public service plan had returned 6.89%, and the Royal Bank survey had performed 7.14%. So over the 4-year period, the median plan was slightly ahead of the public service plan. As pointed out on that slide, over longer-term 5- and 10-year periods, the public service plan still exceeded the Royal Bank piece. I would point out on the 4-year piece, though, it's the difference there is about 25 basis points, 0.25%. And then remembering my comments earlier about how it's important to look at these after costs, you would see that if we did cost adjust using that footnote that I referred to earlier, we would actually see the public service plan being slightly ahead of that benchmark for that 4-year period.
Thank you. And I think this is going to be wrapping up. I have one last question here for Yves. The last COLA period calculated ended on June 30th, 2020, but will only be applied on January 1st, 2021. Why is there a delay?
We just, it's practical. We just need to have the time to be able to calculate it, have it approved by the Board of Trustees, and then implement it so that people can start to receive it on January 1st, 2021. So from a practical perspective, these events, we reach June 30th. Statistics Canada publishes the final June rate at the end of July. The Board of Trustees meets, reviews all the information, approves, and then it takes a few months for everybody's pension to be increased and then implemented on January 1st. So just a matter of practicality.
Okay, thanks, Yves. Nous allons maintenant conclure.
Now we're going to wind up our question period. And if there are questions that you were not able to ask, you can still do so by email or through mail.
And we were not able to answer it during the meeting today. We'll be responding to you and including your question and answer in a summarized document to be posted online at vestcor.org/NBPSPP in the coming weeks. Au nom du Conseil des fiduciaires, je veux vous remercier de votre
In name of all of the Board of Trustees, I'd like to thank you for having come here today. I would like to also thank all the presenters today who took part and
meeting. So thanks again for joining us and have a wonderful day.